Okay, so today I'm pretty much going to show you guys how to take your rendered exhibition and what you ever have so far and work in Photoshop as a way of kind of getting in that like background location. So a few things you have to do before you render in Rhino. So this is, pretty much after you've applied all your material, all your lighting, and pretty much this is like the last step. So before you render your final piece, for this one I could just choose, I'm going to choose the like third kind of by choice perspective. So let's just say I want to show this perspective right here. So before I just render this out, make sure you go to your render properties. And then you pretty much, and keep in mind guys, I am using a Mac. So once your rendering is done, you pretty much just want to save your rendered file. So I'm just going to save it to my desktop. Make sure you select a PNG and make sure you have this transparent background for supported types on, so you don't have that like white background in there. And once you're done rendering, just make sure you save your file. So nothing gets lost. So then pretty much if you look and preview the image, this is pretty much how it's going to appear. It is just the rendered objects without any of the background attached with it, or that white background attached with it. So what I kind of showed you guys in class, and I'll put the description for the link to Envato Elements if you guys want to use some of the stock photos. So pretty much once you get to this website, just make sure you hit photos, and then the photos like thing is up here. So for mine, I could just say, let's just say I want to put it into a museum or a gallery. Yeah, we'll go with that. So let's just say open gallery. Alright, let's just say we want to download this one. So pretty much, if you find an image, all you're going to want to do is just copy the URL up at the top and send me an email or Canvas message with the URL in the description, and then I'll just download it for you and send it back. But since this is for work, I can't necessarily share any password or login information, but definitely just copy and paste that URL and then I could get it for you. And I'll try to be pretty prompt and pretty quick with responding back to you guys. Okay, so once we get Photoshop open, we'll just try to set up our file size here before we get started. So this is pretty much where you want to add the 11 by 17 parameters, just so you're working with the right size. So we want this horizontal, so 17 by 11. I'm just going to want to scale this proportionally. Like I said, kind of leaving those margins on the top and just trying to center it. Okay, so first couple of things is I really don't like the way that these blank frames are, so I'm actually going to walk through how to use the AI tool too. So we're pretty much just going to select the areas that we don't want in our image anymore. So I pretty much just grab the lasso tool, and if I want to add to this selection, you just hold down Shift. So I'm just getting rid of all merge layers. So then now it's just one complete item. So pretty much once you have your image placed, you could take your exhibit rendering PNG, place it in your Photoshop file. And as you could see, like, you know, this perspective doesn't necessarily match the background. So instead of just kind of like manipulating things, use some like warp tools or some way, shape, or form edit the background, there's a much easier way you could do this. So once you have just your exhibit layer selected, you just go to perspective warp and pretty much just draw like a box around your whole content. Hit, enter or return, and then these kind of like 4 points show up. So the way you want to approach this is by pretty much moving these like 4 points, it will edit the perspective of your image. So if we take a look at the background, you could see that, you know, these walls come down at a 90-degree angle, and the way that this kind of back wall is angled, we actually want to follow those, so we kind of get the right perspective. So if we just kind of move this up and really just following the lines of the image that you've chosen, just to get the effect of this exhibit being proportionally correct in your given space. Let's just say that is a comfortable size to where I want my space to be. So again, we're using, if you select your PNG or your rendered out file, again, it's that perspective warp tool to really get the sense of that this object fits in the correct space. And keep in mind, anytime you like go to just scale up or scale down, it will actually go back to like the original thing, but don't worry, as soon as you know, scale it up or down and hit done or return, it will go back to the edits that you just did. So now, because of, you know, these coming in at that 90-degree angle, just like this wall, and then this kind of top piece of my exhibit is really mirroring the angles of the image that you used, is kind of a way to really get the sense of this fitting into your space. So what you could do next to really make the effect that this is truly like fitting into your background is to add a little bit of shadowing. So by doing that, we have obviously our PNG, we have our background, and then the main background or the white background. So we'll just add another layer, put it in between the PNG and the background. So it's going to be behind your rendered out PNG, but in front of your image. And we're pretty much just going to grab the brush tool. So you pretty much hit B. Okay, so we have that shadows layer selected. Then and you could even look back at your Rhino file and reference the lighting. And of course you could do a lot of these effects within Rhino itself, but that might be a little time consuming to figure out. So again, this tutorial is just pretty much showing how to get similar effects just using Photoshop and really get the effect of your exhibit being placed truly within the space. Okay, so with all those shadows included, you could tell, you know, by adding the shadows of the legs and the slight bit of shadow at the bottom, as well as the shadow that kind of this angular roof creates on like the base here. And I also added some more shadows in between the pleats, and then emphasized the pleats a little bit with that same you know, light opacity brush. I think that was around 5%. So you could see just how, just by adding a few different layers of shadowing could really anchor your model into your space. And of course, you know, because of the way, you know, we rendered out our Rhino files, you know, the textures aren't exactly, you know, as accurate and lifelike as possible, and that's totally fine. But the spotlights and the shadows that come from them are definitely helpful in terms of putting it in your space. So along with the top and bottom shadows, or you know, these two layers, so we could just toggle like what that looks like without them, and it just looks so like placed and, you know, not really a part of the actual gallery. So if we turn those back on, we'll be able to see how those shadows really affected and also emphasizes the pleat of the chair and the characteristics of the chair. Okay, so after we add the shadowing, the next step, just to make this a little bit more realistic depending on the image that you use for the background, is just simply adding more light specifically to the background that you want to put in. And again, you could do this within Rhino to your actual exhibited object. You could even maybe pick out the image first and then do the lighting accordingly, just so you can maybe have, like, let's say if this was your project, you could have like the slits of light kind of shine through as a potential option. Or you could kind of do it in Photoshop afterwards. So let's just say I want to use kind of the natural spotlights that this gallery has in the image that I found. Pretty much all you're going to have to do is go to your layers panel, make a new layer. I'm just going to call it Spotlight 1. And then just pick up your polygon lasso tool. So it's pretty much just like the lasso tool, but you could just use your main kind of shapes instead. So I'm just going to do a few of these at a time, just to kind of give that natural lighting aesthetic. And you could kind of see in these spotlights, they're kind of doing it with the way that this like, you know, light spiral kind of comes out. But we kind of want these, maybe some of them pointing down on the wall or down on the exhibit that we have. So again, just go to your polygon lasso tool, and we'll just kind of create like a triangle shape around it. Then we'll go to our gradient tool, go up to our selection here, and we'll make sure that one color is at, we have the 0% opacity, and then for this color we'll just choose most likely some sort of kind of like a light yellow, and we could always adjust the color afterwards, but actually, since I'm looking at the old lighting, it's definitely more bluish white, so maybe like a light blue somewhere in there, and then make sure that is at 100% opacity, and this is at 0. So just hit OK. Then you'll just, still with the gradient tool selected, you'll notice our marquee tool, where the mouse is moving down here, is kind of this like cross dotted shape. You'll pretty much just click and drag where that is, and then you'll already see, if we just deselect this, we could already see that like artificial like light look. And if we want to adjust that any, we could just go hit Command Z, or on your guys' computers it might be Control or Option Z for undo. We could then just go back to the gradient tool, double click back on this, and we can always just adjust the color just a slight bit more if we want a little bit different effect. You just hit OK, and then just to make this so you could kind of see like these like clear lines, so just to make it a little bit more realistic looking, we'll just go into filter, I believe it is blur, and we'll just select Gaussian blur, and then somewhere around 6 to 10 radius pixels is probably good. So we hit deselect. Now you see kind of the corners of that spotlight are a little bit more like faded or blurred, whereas like before you could definitely see that like line that looks like a little less real. So again, that's just filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'll even kind of up it just a little bit more. We could even maybe try 30. It kind of just depends on the lighting of your scene and how much you want the spotlight to be blended into kind of the background image. So I'll kind of just do that with some of the other spotlights. So you kind of get the essence of those lights, and you can just add it to anything else. So that is a way that you could add kind of that artificial lighting effect. And if you want, just like we used the kind of brush tool and kind of added a darker shadow, you could also do the same thing with the highlights. So instead of using a black or a dark gray for the shadows, you just use that lighter white color, or we kind of had kind of a whitish blue tint for our spotlights, so you could go back and add some of those in areas that really emphasize that light. But again, you could also do that within Rhino. So you could do a little bit of both in both types of programs, and you could even just enhance it just a little bit more here in Photoshop. Okay, so this portion of the video is pretty much just for if you cannot find a good stock image on Envato Elements, that photo website that I was talking about. This is a really good way you can use the AI generative tool in Photoshop to kind of create a scene that you want. So you'll pretty much open a Photoshop file just like before, just set it automatically to 17 by 11, and then just take your rectangle marquee tool and just click and drag approximately where you want the image to appear on the page. So then this bar will automatically apply, but if you guys don't see it at first, you'll just go to Window, and then it's going to be this contextual toolbar that you'll make sure is checked, then it should show up. So you're just going to hit Generative Fill, and this is where you need to be a little bit more creative, but kind of super specific about what you want the image to be generated as. Let's say I want a forested area to, place my exhibit maybe in a park or something. So with that, I could say, let's say, green grass in a forested area with lots of trees. On a bright, sunny day. No people in sight, with a larger open area in the center. So, like I said, try to get as detailed of a description you want, and you could always like rewrite these as they generate and kind of see what kind of pops out. So usually it takes just a few seconds, and it'll actually give you these, 3 variations again. That one, not so much. This one, definitely way better. And that one looks pretty good too. And you could also prompt the generative tool to say, in a certain perspective or in a certain angle. So you could just go back into the description that we just made. Kind of sucks that you can't like find the end, but then just say at a top view perspective, and then just hit generate again, and it will always save your previous variations. So if you do type in something else, you won't have to worry about like losing the last thing that was created. So if you do want to go back and edit the text to change something else, that's totally fine too. So now it's giving me generative tools on a top forest view. That one I don't like as much. But then there's also, general trees or grass. And let's say if this is the one that I like the most, I could just select that. And since it didn't give me too much of a kind of center space where I could potentially place my exhibit, all I would have to do is let's just circle this and just hit generative fill. And like I mentioned before, if you're just clearing a space, you don't have to type in anything. You just hit generate. And by doing that, the program kind of knows that you're looking to just basically, fill the space and get rid of any of the objects like with inside of it. So you could always like edit on top of any generative fill that you apply. That one's okay. I'd say that one's probably the best. Actually, I'll go with that one, and then we'll just specifically grab these guys. Again, hold shift if you're trying to edit out specific areas. So again, just generative fill, generate. And let's see what pops up. All right, I think like that one the best. So now I could still re-export my, or if you have already, that required like top view of your exhibit, I could just place it in this kind of open grassy area if I wanted a field or a forest. Just place it right in the center. Of course, keep scale into mind. If these are large gatherings of trees and your exhibit's only 10 by 10, it might only just take up like this much space, not this like whole thing, because that would be very large in terms of scale.
Okay, so the next thing I kind of just wanted to cover real quick, it's definitely a amazing tool that I use, personally for work and everything all the time, especially when you're looking for specific images and you don't have access to any sort of stock photo, website, or even, it's helpful for illustrations or, pretty much anything that you need and then you don't really have the resources to do so. So this is another AI-generated tool that I'm sure most of you guys have heard or even maybe used before, but it's actually using the Discord server. It's called Midjourney. And it's super easy to use. As you can see, I use it for reference sketches for a project that I'm doing at work, just to get a sense of, sketching style. And then I reference a lot of this when I do my own charcoal work for certain pieces that I do. But I could pretty much use for any sort of AI-generated images of any kind, really of any style, as long as you just kind of give it a specific description and then it spits out something pretty accurately. And I would say Midjourney is a little bit better in terms of an AI image generator than the one Photoshop has, mostly because you have all these awesome options after Midjourney spits out an image. You could select certain things, change very specific things about an image that does spit out, and vice versa, whereas Photoshop sometimes is a little harder to do that. So once you guys download Midjourney, you could just find it on, just type in Midjourney download, and I believe they do have a free trial period of 5 to like 10 images or something, and then you do have to pay for it, but I believe it's only like $10 a month. I know for me, it's 100% worth it, because it gives me good like reference images and good, because I'm not the best at drawing people. It's definitely not my like #1 skill, I would say. It's definitely more, typographic based stuff, but I use a lot of these as references for work and just personal stuff, so it might help you guys in some way, shape, or form similar to that too. So I would recommend getting the subscription for it, but if you're just going to plan on using it for this project, I believe it gives you like 5 images to create for free, so just keep that in mind too. So when you get everything downloaded, you obviously have to have the Discord app, or application, software, whatever you want to call it, downloaded on your computer. So I'll do that first, and then go to Midjourney, sign up, and then it should prompt you with this kind of area. Usually it just comes up in your different kind of Discord channels or messages up on the side, and you just go to a direct message. And to kind of prompt an image, all you have to do is kind of this slash mark, and then usually it just has it up at the top, but it's, image, so you just hit that, and it'll have a prompt box with like a, blinking cursor in there, so this is where you're going to type out your description. So for the sake of this example, let's say I'm looking to create a environment. I'm just going to use one of your guys' projects as example. I'll take, I think I'll take Kono as an example. If you guys remember her, kind of rose or flower inspired ground relief, she mentioned she wanted it in some sort of garden or botanical garden, things like that. So let's try to maybe make something along those lines. Oops. So I guess what we could start out doing is just be as detailed as you possibly can. So create an image of a botanical garden with a maze of low bushes and an open space in the center of the maze, placed in a, elegant outdoor space. So once you send that command, Midjourney will process the keywords, and it'll usually give you this kind of like percentage of how fast it's going, and of course the better Wi-Fi you have or better connection you have, the faster that these images will be generated. And usually it spits out 4 images that you select, so this is like halfway done. They look kind of weird now, but there's definitely some things you can add on to it once it's done generating. And these are always like pretty high quality images, and you can always change the size of the image afterwards. So once it's done generating, it will kind of spit out these 4 images. So what kind of U1, U2, U3, U4, and as long as, as far as V1, V2, V3, V4, it just is is pointing at like this is U or V1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. It's just a way that like Midjourney, says like, oh, I like this image, so instead of just click on it, you'll just hit U or V4. U is pretty much like if you like exactly how it is right now, you just hit U, but if you want to pick an image and edit slightly, you'll hit the V option. So let's say out of this, I'm liking this top left version a little better, but I do kind of want to change something, so I'll just hit V1, editing it. So this is pretty much the remix prompt. So what you'll do for the sizing, you actually click on the one that you like, it'll spit out another one, and then you'll actually use custom zoom. So then it adds this line of code AR 1/1, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. And since we're working with 17 by 11, we'll probably just want to do a 6 by 9 ratio. So then it will, wait to start editing the image or zooming out of the image with that ratio prompt in mind. And I believe zoom will, zoom into the photo like 2 times. You could, put 0, you could put 1, you could put 10, and it will kind of give you that like expanded view, just like Photoshop kind of did with the generative expand tool. So it'll give you a little bit more like details on like the outside of the image. So let's say I'm really liking this version down here, V4. So if I want to do that, you actually have to do it before the zoom code down here. So you just put it right before in a top view perspective. And you could put this prompt in for the side view or the front view, and then the custom view that you want to use. So again, it's just like giving you less work you have to do in Photoshop in terms of putting your exhibit in and like messing with the perspective warp and things like that if you have an image that is already at like the perspective that you need. And this also might come in handy because a lot of the times you won't find a above or top view perspective on the exact like image you want to take. So by kind of doing this, it will kind of give you that ability. So these are a little bit zoomed out. So let's just say if I want to take V4, let's just say zoom -3. Let's just say top down, just make it a little bit more specific. And by adding that zoom of a -3, it actually should zoom in more to that center of the courtyard that we're looking for. Image picked, we'll just select U4, and it should spit out just an exact copy of what we just put in. And you can just right-click within Midjourney and just say Save Image, and just give it a random name. We'll just go Courtyard 1. I'm just going to save it to my desktop to make it easy to find. Make sure it is a PNG. And then we just pull that up in Photoshop. Because remember, if we're still using Kono's project as an example here, you obviously want the exhibition to be in the center of the courtyard instead of the generated like center sculpture or kind of grass area that is in the image currently. So that's something we can just real quickly pull up in Photoshop and get rid of and delete as well. So once we have that in here, just make sure we unlock the layer, grab your lasso tool. So actually we will try to use generative fill here, so it kind of just depends. If you have more of a simplistic thing that you're trying to delete or replace, the content fill aware tool will be a little easier, but other things that might be a little bit more complicated like this with the shadows and everything, it might just be easier just to use that. So we'll just go with that, and then place your exhibit on the inside. And again, if it's not quite the right size that we're looking for, we could just use the generative tool to make it that correct size, but without, you know, blowing up the pixelation or then causing it to look a little blurry like when you go to print it out. So that's kind of a mix of Midjourney, if that's available for you guys, a mixture of some more AI tools for Photoshop, and again, we could just kind of flip through. I like that option the best, and this is something you could even then crop yourself, and then add your space if you want to get a little bit more closer in detail. So hopefully that's covering everything that you guys were kind of inquiring about. If not, feel free to send me an email about extra, you know, Photoshop questions. I know some of you guys had like very specific ideas in mind for like locational things. So if there's like any specific questions to your locations, just feel free to shoot me an email real quick and we could kind of just like go through it. But thanks.